The alarm screamed through the crystal halls of the Galactic Council Station like a dying animal. Ambassador Thelena ran through the corridors as fast as her thin legs could carry her. Her blue skin had turned almost white with fear, and her large eyes were wet with tears that never stopped falling. The emergency session hall filled quickly with representatives from dozens of worlds. The air shimmered with different breathing gases as species from across the galaxy gathered in panic. Some floated in gravity fields while others stood on legs that looked like tree branches. The crystalline collective sent their brightest member, whose body caught the light and threw rainbows across the walls. The gas dancers arrived as swirling clouds of purple mist that somehow managed to look worried. Council Leader Vextel floated above them all in his transparent sphere. His jellyfish-like form pulsed with stress patterns that everyone could read. He had been leading peaceful discussions about trade routes and cultural exchanges just hours ago. Now he faced something none of them had dealt with in over 1,000 years. Show them the transmission, Thelena begged from the speaking platform. Her voice carried the musical quality that made Zephyrian poetry so beautiful across the galaxy. But now it cracked with desperation and terror that made even the bravest council members feel sick to their stomachs. The holographic display activated and filled the center of the hall. What they saw made many representatives cry out in horror. Zephyrian cities burned under a red sky. The delicate spire buildings that reached toward the clouds like flowers seeking sunlight were broken and falling. Smoke rose from what had been gardens and art centers just days before. The Krex Empire came without warning, Thelena continued as the images played. They demanded our surrender, and when we tried to explain that we had nothing they wanted, they began bombing our cities. We sent them our finest artwork thinking they might want cultural exchange. They used our sculptures for target practice. The display showed Krex soldiers marching through Zephyrian streets. The invaders stood twice as tall as the peaceful plant-eaters, and their thick gray skin was covered in scars from countless battles. They carried weapons that could melt through the organic buildings like hot knives through butter. Behind them walked Zephyrians in chains with their heads hanging low in defeat. They take our people as slaves, Thelena's voice broke completely now. Our children are loaded onto transport ships. Our elders are worked to death in their mining operations. We try to run, but they hunt us through the forests like animals. We are farmers and artists and teachers. We know nothing of fighting or violence. We do not even have words for many of the terrible things they do to us. Representative Cloth of the Peaceful Traders Union made a sound like wind through metal tubes. Surely we can negotiate with them. All reasonable beings want something. Perhaps we can offer them resources or technology in exchange for leaving the Zephyrians alone. You do not understand, Thelena replied while new images showed Krex soldiers destroying a Zephyrian school. They enjoy the violence, they take pleasure in causing pain. When our leaders offered them everything we had, they laughed and said they would take it anyway and take us too. Their Admiral Zakmer told us that weak species exist only to serve the strong. The hall erupted in nervous sounds as dozens of species tried to process this information. Most of them had never encountered true evil before. Their homeworlds were peaceful places where different species worked together and solved problems through discussion and compromise. The idea of someone attacking just to cause suffering was almost impossible for them to understand. What can we do? Asked the representative from the Knowledge Seekers. Our security forces are trained to stop thieves and settle disputes between traders. We have never fought a real war. Our weapons are designed to disable, not destroy. The combined patrol fleet has 40 ships, offered Representative Yix, whose snake-like form coiled nervously around his speaking platform. But they are spread across 50 systems protecting trade routes. Even if we gathered them all together, they are not built for war against an enemy like this. More holographic images showed the true scale of the Krex invasion. Hundreds of warships surrounded Zephyrian worlds like metal sharks circling helpless fish. Each Krex vessel was covered in weapons and armor plating that made them look like flying fortresses. They had been built for one purpose only, and the purpose was dealing death to anyone who opposed them. "How long do your people have?" asked Council Leader Vextal quietly. "Days maybe," Thelena whispered. "They are saving the children for last because they know it causes us the most pain to watch them suffer." Admiral Zachmore broadcasts messages to us showing what he plans to do. He wants us to feel hopeless before the end comes. The representatives looked at each other with growing despair. The gentle giants who could move mountains with their strength were too slow to reach the Zephyrian systems in time. The swift travelers could get there quickly, but their ships were built for speed, not fighting. The energy beings offered to try reasoning with the Krex, but everyone knew it would be useless. Far away at the edge of human space, a small monitoring station picked up the Galactic Council transmission. Lieutenant Jake Morrison had been listening to alien communications for 3 years as part of Earth's secret intelligence gathering program. He spoke 12 galactic languages now and could understand the desperate pleading in Ambassador Thelena's voice. "Commander Rodriguez, you need to hear this right now," he called across the small observation post. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he had not moved from his station since the emergency broadcasts began. "Commander." Lisa Rodriguez hurried over and put on the translation headset. Her face grew dark as she listened to the Zephyrian ambassador describing the horrors being visited on her people. Rodriguez had served in 3 different Earth conflicts, and she recognized the signs of a species being systematically destroyed by an enemy that enjoyed causing suffering. "Get me a secure channel to Earth Command immediately," she ordered. Priority 1 Emergency Protocol. "Ma'am, what should I tell them?" Morrison asked while his fingers flew over the communication controls. "Tell them that peaceful aliens are being slaughtered by space Nazis, and the Galactic Police Force consists of social workers with stun guns," Rodriguez replied grimly. "Tell them it's time to introduce the galaxy to some humans who know how to fight." The transmission raced across space toward Earth carrying news of a distant tragedy. None of the desperate aliens pleading for help in the council chambers knew that their message had been heard by a species that had spent its entire history learning how to destroy enemies who threatened innocent people. The Deathworlders were about to learn that someone needed their help. The secure transmission from the monitoring station reached Earth Global Defense Command in less than 4 hours. General Frank Carter stood in the war room staring at the holographic display that showed the distant Zephyrian star systems where innocent people were dying while he watched. The room buzzed with activity as intelligence analysts worked frantically to gather every piece of information they could find about the Krex Empire and their invasion fleet. "Sir, we have confirmed the transmission is genuine," reported Lieutenant Colonel Amy Brooks as she handed Carter a datapad filled with analysis reports. "Our linguists have been studying Galactic Council communications for 5 years now, and this matches all known patterns. The Zephyrians are a peaceful agricultural species with no military capabilities whatsoever." Carter nodded grimly while studying the tactical data his team had assembled. "What do we know about these Krex bastards who are attacking them?" "Standard galactic bullies from what we can determine," answered Commander Lisa Rodriguez, who had flown in from the monitoring station just 2 hours earlier. "They have superior numbers and technology compared to most council species, but their tactics are primitive. They rely on overwhelming force and terror rather than strategy or innovation." "Primitive by whose standards?" Carter asked with a slight smile that did not reach his eyes. "Ours, sir," Rodriguez replied. "From what we have observed, their entire military doctrine is based on frontal assault and intimidation. They have never fought an enemy that could match their firepower or had any real experience with asymmetric warfare." The general turned to address the room full of officers who had been summoned for this emergency meeting. "Ladies and gentlemen, the Galactic Council thinks we are just another primitive species not worth their attention. They have been ignoring Earth for decades because our technology looked backward compared to theirs. What they do not understand is that while they were building pretty cities and writing poetry, we were perfecting the art of killing people who deserve to die." Captain Ben Sullivan stood up from his seat near the back of the room. The veteran of Earth's resource wars had scars on his face that told stories of battles fought in the asteroid belt against corporate raiders and pirate fleets. "General, what are our rules of engagement if we decide to intervene?" "Simple, Captain," Carter replied, as he pointed to the images of burning Zephyrian cities. "Any Krex forces actively engaged in combat operations against civilians are legitimate targets. Any Krex forces that surrender will be treated according to the Geneva Convention as adapted for space warfare. Any Krex forces that continue to harm prisoners or civilians after we announce our presence will be eliminated with extreme prejudice." The room fell silent as the implications of those orders sank in. Earth had not fought a major war in 20 years, but every person in this room remembered the lessons learned from humanity's violent history. They knew how to fight enemies who thought they were invincible, and they knew how to win. "Ma'am," Carter said as he turned to Admiral Susan Blake, who commanded Earth's deep space fleet, "how quickly can we get a task force to the Zephyrian systems, the UES?" "Valkyrie is our fastest ship, and she is already prepped for deep space patrol," Blake answered, after consulting her command tablet. "Captain Helen Foster can have her crew ready for departure in 6 hours. The rest of Battle Group 7 can follow within 18 hours if you want to send the full force." "Negative on the full battle group for now," Carter decided. "I want this to start as a reconnaissance mission. The Valkyrie will scout the situation and report back before we commit our main force. The galaxy is about to learn that Earth exists, but I want our first impression to be surgical precision, not overwhelming force." Captain Foster received her orders personally from General Carter in a secure briefing room deep beneath the Global Defense Command headquarters. She had served aboard the Valkyrie for 3 years and knew her ship and crew better than anyone. Her vessel was the most advanced stealth warship in Earth's fleet, designed specifically for operations in hostile territory. "Captain, your mission is to gather intelligence on Krex forces and capabilities while providing whatever assistance you can to Zephyrian civilians," Carter explained while showing her detailed star charts of the target systems. "You have full authority to engage enemy forces if they pose an immediate threat to non-combatants, but try to avoid revealing the full extent of human military capabilities." "Understood, sir," Foster replied. "What about the Galactic Council forces that might be in the area?" "Avoid contact if possible, but do not let their presence stop you from protecting innocent people," Carter answered. "The Council species are not our enemies, but they also are not our allies yet. We do not know how they will react to discovering that humans have been watching them for years." Within hours, the Yuza Valkyrie was racing through space toward the Zephyrian systems at speeds that would have amazed any Galactic Council observer. Her experimental drive system bent space around the ship, allowing her to cover distances in days that would take most alien vessels weeks to travel. Her crew of 90 specialists included some of Earth's best soldiers, scientists, and engineers. Commander Jake Peterson led the ship's Marine contingent and spent the journey studying everything Earth's intelligence services had learned about Krex military equipment and tactics. His soldiers practiced boarding operations and close combat techniques that had been perfected during Earth's long history of warfare. They prepared for enemies who were bigger and stronger than humans, but had never faced opponents who could think faster and fight smarter. "The Krex rely on energy shields and plasma weapons," Peterson explained to his troops during a briefing session. "Their armor is designed to stop energy attacks, but our kinetic weapons should punch right through. More importantly, their doctrine assumes that superior firepower guarantees victory, so they have never learned to adapt when things go wrong." Lieutenant Sarah Wilson, who served as the ship's intelligence officer, had been studying intercepted Krex communications for the entire journey. "Their command structure is rigid and hierarchical," she reported to Captain Foster. "Individual ship commanders have very little authority to change tactics without direct orders from their fleet admiral. If we can disrupt their communications, we can probably make them panic." Captain Foster nodded as she reviewed the tactical plan her officers had developed. "Remember, people, we are not just fighting for the Zephyrians. We are showing the galaxy what humanity is capable of when innocent people need our help. The Krex Empire thinks they are the strongest predators in space, but they have never met any humans before. The Valkyrie dropped out of faster than light travel at the edge of the Zephyr Prime system and immediately activated her stealth systems. Long-range sensors showed dozens of Krex warships in orbit around the peaceful planet while smaller vessels hunted fleeing civilian transports through the outer asteroid belt. The ship's crew watched in growing anger as their sensors detected energy weapon signatures bombarding population centers on the planet below. "Captain," reported the sensor operator quietly, "I am reading massive civilian casualties on the surface. The Krex are targeting hospital, schools, and refugee centers specifically." Foster's jaw tightened as she stared at the tactical display. "Then it is time to teach these aliens why humans do not tolerate bullies. Battle stations everyone. Let U.S. show the Krex Empire what happens when Deathworlders get angry." The emergency transmission from Admiral Zakmer reached the Galactic Council station while the representatives were still debating how to help the Zephyrians. The massive Krex commander appeared on the holographic display with his gray skin mottled with stress patterns and his eyes wild with confusion and rage. Behind him on his bridge, dozens of his officers worked frantically at damaged control stations, while red warning lights flashed across damaged systems. "Council weaklings," Zakmer roared as his image flickered from communication interference. "What mercenary species have you hired to attack my fleets? My ships are being destroyed by enemies I cannot see or track. They strike like lightning and vanish before my gunners can return fire." Council leader Vextal floated in his transparent sphere, looking genuinely confused by the Admiral's accusations. His jellyfish form pulsed with patterns that indicated bewilderment and concern as he tried to process what he was hearing from the Krex commander. "Admiral Zakmer, we have hired no mercenaries," Vextal replied in his calm diplomatic voice. "The Galactic Council has no military forces capable of the operations you describe. We are a peaceful organization dedicated to trade and cultural exchange, not warfare." "Lies," Zakmer snarled while the bridge shook around him from some distant explosion. "These new ships use technology beyond anything in Council databases. Their weapons punch through our shields like they do not exist. Their stealth systems make them invisible to our best sensors. They fight like demons from the void itself." Ambassador Thelena stood up from her seat with hope shining in her large eyes for the first time since the invasion began. Her blue skin had regained some of its normal color as she listened to the Krex Admiral's description of his mysterious attackers. "Admiral, perhaps you face a previously unknown civilization," she suggested carefully. "The galaxy is vast and new species are discovered regularly. Maybe someone else heard our calls for help and decided to intervene." "Unknown civilization," Zakmer laughed bitterly. "What species could develop such advanced military technology without the Council knowing about them? These attackers coordinate their strikes with precision that suggests centuries of warfare experience. They know exactly where to hit us to cause maximum damage." The transmission suddenly filled with static as warning alarms blared in the background. Through the interference, the Council representatives could hear Krex officers shouting battle reports about multiple contacts approaching their position. Zakmer turned away from the communication screen to bark orders at his crew. "All ships defensive formation Alpha," he commanded. "Launch all fighters and prepare for close engagement. If these ghosts want a real fight, they can have one." The transmission cut to static, leaving the Council chamber in stunned silence. Representatives from dozens of species looked at each other with growing amazement as they tried to understand what they had just witnessed. The mighty Krex Empire that had terrorized peaceful worlds for generations was apparently being defeated by enemies they could not even identify. "Could it be possible?" whispered Representative Cloth from the Peaceful Traders Union. "Could there really be an unknown military power in our galaxy strong enough to challenge the Krex?" Far away in Earth's orbital command center, General Frank Carter received the reconnaissance reports from Captain Foster with growing satisfaction. The intelligence gathered by the Valkyrie's stealth operations had provided detailed information about Krex fleet composition capabilities and tactical doctrine that would prove invaluable in the coming battle. "Admiral Blake," he said to the fleet commander who stood beside him studying the tactical displays. "It is time to show the galaxy what human military doctrine really looks like. Deploy Battle Group 7 with full authorization to engage." "Admiral." Susan Blake nodded grimly as she activated her command authority codes. "All ships, this is Admiral Blake. Operation Righteous Fury is now active. Proceed to jump coordinates and prepare for full-scale combat operations against Krex forces in the Zephyrian systems." Across Earth's orbital shipyards, massive warships that had been preparing in secret began their journey toward the distant battle zone. The UES Thunderstrike led the formation as the flagship of Battle Group 7 with her heavy armor and devastating weapon arrays, designed specifically for ship-to-ship combat. Behind her followed the UES Defiance, the UES Liberty, and 8 other vessels that represented the finest examples of human military engineering. Each ship carried crews that had trained for years in simulated combat against alien opponents using intelligence gathered from decades of secret observation. Their weapons combined kinetic projectiles with directed energy systems in ways that no galactic military had ever encountered. Their defensive systems used active countermeasures and electronic warfare techniques that had been perfected during Earth's long history of conflict. Captain Carol Wright commanded the UES Thunderstrike and had served in every major space engagement in Earth's recent history. She studied the tactical data transmitted by the Valkyrie while her crew prepared their ship for the largest battle any human force had ever fought. "The Krex rely on energy shields and plasma weapons," she explained to her department heads during the final briefing before combat. "Their ships are heavily armored, but they have never faced coordinated attacks, using both kinetic and energy weapons simultaneously. We hit them hard and fast before they can adapt to our tactics." The human fleet entered the Zephyrian system. While Admiral Zachmer was still trying to reorganize his forces after the latest stealth attacks by Captain Foster's ship, long-range sensors detected the approaching human vessels, but the Krex Admiral dismissed them as another group of council ships coming to make meaningless diplomatic protests. "Admiral," reported his sensor operator nervously, "the approaching ships are not broadcasting any council identification codes. Their drive signatures do not match anything in our databases." Zachmer turned to stare at the tactical display showing a dozen unknown contacts approaching his position at high speed. For the first time since the ghost attacks began, he was going to face his mysterious enemies in open battle where superior Krex firepower could be brought to bear. "Finally," he growled with savage satisfaction. "Prepare all ships for combat. Launch fighters and ready the main bombardment arrays. These unknown fools have made the mistake of revealing themselves for direct confrontation." The Krex fleet moved into battle formation with over 60 warships, arranging themselves for the kind of devastating frontal assault that had conquered dozens of worlds. Energy weapons charged to full power while fighter squadrons launched from carrier bays to provide close support for the capital ships. What Admiral Zachmer did not realize was that he was about to face an enemy that had spent its entire existence learning how to destroy opponents who thought they were invincible. The human fleet approached with cold precision while their crews prepared to demonstrate why Earth had never lost a war when fighting for the survival of innocent people. "This is Admiral Blake to all ships," came the calm voice over the human fleet communication network. "Weapons free on all Krex targets. Show them what happens when Deathworlders get serious about ending a fight." The final battle for the Zephyrian worlds was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The final battle began above Zephyr Prime, where the peaceful planet hung like a blue and green jewel against the darkness of space. Admiral Zachmer had positioned his remaining 58 warships in a defensive formation around the world, while his ground forces continued their brutal occupation of the surface cities. He stood on his flagship bridge watching the approaching human fleet with grim determination to finally face his mysterious enemies in open combat. "Admiral, the unknown ships are broadcasting on all frequencies," reported his communication officer. "They are demanding our immediate withdrawal from Zephyrian space." "Let them talk," Zachmer growled as he studied the tactical display. 12 ships against 58. These fools have made the mistake of revealing themselves for a fair fight. Today, the Krex Empire will show the galaxy what happens to those who dare challenge our supremacy." The voice that came through the communication system was calm and professional, but carried an undertone of absolute authority that made even the battle-hardened Krex officers pause in their preparations. "Captain." Helen Foster spoke for the human fleet as the UES Valkyrie took its position alongside the larger warships. "This is Captain Helen Foster of the United Earthship Valkyrie speaking for the Human Defense Fleet. Krex forces, you are hereby ordered to cease all hostile operations against the Zephyrian people and withdraw from their territory immediately. You have 30 seconds to comply." Admiral Zakmer laughed loudly enough for his bridge crew to hear. "Humans," he said with amusement. "I have never heard of this species before. You dare to challenge the might of the Krex Empire with a handful of primitive vessels. We have conquered 47 worlds and enslaved dozens of species. What makes you think you can succeed where entire galactic civilizations have failed?" The response came from Admiral Susan Blake aboard the UES Thunderstrike, and her voice carried the cold certainty of someone who had never lost a battle when innocent lives were at stake. "Because, Admiral, we are from Earth, and Earth does not negotiate with bullies. You have had your warning. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for generations to come." The human fleet did not charge forward in the kind of glorious frontal assault that characterized most galactic warfare. Instead, they separated into 3 groups and approached from different angles while launching clouds of small objects that Krex sensors initially dismissed as debris or electronic countermeasures. "Admiral, those objects are accelerating toward our ships," warned the tactical officer as his instruments tried to track hundreds of small contacts moving at incredible speeds. "They appear to be some kind of kinetic projectile system." The first wave of human missiles struck the Krex formation before their energy shields could adjust to track such small, fast-moving targets. Each missile carried a tungsten penetrator designed to punch through alien armor and detonate inside enemy ships. The Krex had never encountered weapons that combined physical projectiles with sophisticated guidance systems, and their shields proved useless against the kinetic assault. 3 Krex destroyers exploded in sequence as human missiles found their reactor cores. 2 heavy cruisers lost power and began drifting helplessly as their engineering sections were reduced to scrap metal. The alien formation started to break apart as ship commanders tried to maneuver away from weapons they could not defend against. "All ships return fire," Zakmer commanded as his own flagship shook from multiple impacts. "Launch fighters and close to point-blank range. Show these humans what Krex plasma cannon can do to their hulls." The Krex fleet responded with the overwhelming firepower that had terrorized peaceful species across the galaxy. Hundreds of energy weapons fired simultaneously, while fighter squadrons raced toward the human ships with orders to destroy them through superior numbers and aggressive tactics, but the humans did not fight like any enemy the Krex had ever faced. The UES Thunderstrike and her escorts used the gravity well of nearby asteroids to slingshot around the Krex formation while firing precisely targeted salvos at enemy command centers and weapon systems. Their electronic warfare suite jammed Krex communications and targeting systems, while their point defense arrays shot down incoming missiles with mechanical precision. Captain Carroll Wright commanded the Thunderstrike with the calm efficiency of someone who had trained for this exact scenario hundreds of times in simulation. "Target their flagship," she ordered. Multiple missile spreads aimed at their bridge and main reactor. "Let us show Admiral Zakmer what happens when humans get serious about ending a fight." The Krex flagship tried to turn away from the incoming human attack, but found itself caught between multiple firing angles as the human ships coordinated their assault with devastating precision. Kinetic penetrators slammed into the massive alien vessel, while energy weapons carved through armor plating that had been designed to stop conventional galactic weapons. Admiral Zakmer felt his ship dying around him as systems failed and compartments vented atmosphere into space. His bridge filled with smoke while emergency lights cast everything in hellish red shadows. For the first time in his military career, he faced an enemy that was better at warfare than the supposedly invincible Krex Empire. Admiral called his communication officer through the chaos. The humans are broadcasting a surrender demand on all frequencies. They say any ship that stops fighting will be allowed to withdraw safely. Never, Zakmer roared even as his flagship listed to one side from massive structural damage. The Krex Empire does not surrender to unknown primitives. All ships fight. To the death. But his remaining ship commanders had watched half their fleet destroyed in less than 20 minutes by an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move. The humans fought with a combination of advanced technology and tactical sophistication that made Krex military doctrine look like children playing with toys. One by one, the surviving Krex vessels began powering down their weapons and broadcasting surrender signals. Their crews had no desire to die for an admiral who refused to accept the reality of their situation. The few ships that continued fighting were systematically destroyed by human forces that showed no mercy to those who threatened innocent civilians. Admiral Zakmer found himself alone on his dying flagship as the last of his fleet either surrendered or fled toward the edge of the star system. His bridge was in ruins and his crew was either dead or unconscious from the devastating human attack. Through the static of his damaged communication system, he heard a human voice speaking directly to him. Admiral Zakmer, this is Commander Jake Peterson of the Human Defense Forces. Your ship is disabled and your fleet is defeated. Surrender now and you will be treated according to our laws of war. Continue fighting and you will be destroyed. The proud Krex admiral looked around at the wreckage of his command and realized that his empire had just encountered something it had never faced before. An enemy that was not only stronger but also more ruthless when defending innocent people. The humans had destroyed his fleet not through superior numbers but through superior skill and technology. I surrender, he said quietly into his communication system. The battle was over, and the galaxy had just witnessed the birth of a new galactic power. The Galactic Council monitoring stations recorded every moment of the engagement, showing how human forces had defeated a military empire that had terrorized peaceful worlds for generations. Ambassador Thelena received the news while standing in the council chambers surrounded by representatives who could barely believe what their sensors were telling them. The mysterious human fleet was now in orbit around Zephyr Prime, while Krex survivors fled toward the edge of the system. Who are these humans? She whispered as she watched the tactical displays showing human ships moving to provide humanitarian aid to her people on the surface. The answer came 6 hours later when Admiral Blake's face appeared on the council communication system. Her expression was serious but not hostile as she addressed the gathered representatives of dozens of galactic civilizations. I am Admiral Susan Blake of the United Earth Defense Forces. We have been monitoring your communications for several years and decided to intervene when we learned that innocent people were being slaughtered. We come not as conquerors but as protectors of those who cannot protect themselves. How did you know we needed help? Thelena asked with tears of gratitude. In her large eyes, Admiral Blake smiled for the first time since the battle ended. Ambassador, we are humans, and we come from a world where everything tries to kill you, so we learn to be very good at killing back. We heard you calling for help, and where we come from that is all the invitation we need to do what is right. The Galactic Council's first official contact with humanity came not through careful diplomatic protocols, but through the smoking wreckage of an oppressor's fleet, and the grateful tears of those they had saved. Earth had announced itself to the galaxy not as conquerors seeking territory, but as protectors willing to fight for justice. The Deathworlders had arrived, and they had made it clear that bullies were no longer welcome in civilized space. The morning started like any other for Commander Zara Vex as she sat in the command chair of her crystal ship floating near the edge of known space. Her people, the Zephyrians, had been exploring the galaxy for thousands of years and had seen many strange things, but nothing could have prepared her for what was about to happen. The peaceful hum of her ship's engines was suddenly broken by an emergency signal that made her crystalline body flash with worry. The message came through broken and filled with static noise, but the fear in the alien voice was clear enough to understand. Something terrible was happening in the outer regions of the galaxy, something that made even the bravest species run in terror. Zara listened carefully as the voice described ships that appeared from nowhere, weapons that consumed entire planets and creatures that fed on the life force of every living being they encountered. These invaders called themselves the Devourers, and they were unlike anything the galaxy had ever faced before. They didn't just destroy worlds like other conquerors might do, they consumed them completely, leaving behind empty husks of rock floating in space. Worse yet, any beings they captured didn't simply die. They were changed into something horrible and twisted that served the Devourers' dark purposes. Zara immediately sent the message to the Galactic Council, the governing body that had maintained peace across the known universe for over 3,000 years. The council was made up of dozens of different species, all of them advanced civilizations that had long ago given up warfare in favor of diplomacy and scientific progress. They had built a society based on cooperation and mutual understanding, and violence was something they had left behind in their primitive past. Within hours, more reports began flooding in from across the galaxy. Entire star systems were going dark as the Devourers swept through them like a plague. The few survivors who managed to escape told horrifying stories of ships that could phase through solid matter, weapons that seemed to eat energy itself, and worst of all, the way the Devourers seemed to grow stronger with each world they consumed. The Council met in emergency session on their massive space station that orbited the galactic core. Ambassador Thane Coral of the plant-like Verdani species stood before the assembled delegates, his leaf-covered body trembling as he spoke. His people had been among the first to encounter the Devourers, and his homeworld was now nothing more than a dead rock floating in space. Our defensive fleets were destroyed within hours, Thane said, his voice barely above a whisper. These creatures don't fight like any enemy we have ever known. They seem to anticipate our every move, and their technology is beyond our understanding. We sent our best warships against them, vessels that had never known defeat, and they were torn apart like paper. The ethereal voidlings, beings of pure energy that had transcended physical form eons ago, spoke through their representative with voices that sounded like distant music. We attempted to communicate with them, to understand their motivations and find a peaceful solution. They responded by attempting to consume our energy directly. Many of our people were absorbed before we could retreat. As the reports continued, a pattern began to emerge that filled the council with growing dread. The Devourers weren't just another aggressive species looking to expand their territory, they were something far worse. They appeared to be a force of pure consumption, driven by an insatiable hunger that could never be satisfied. Every world they took made them stronger. Every life they consumed added to their power. The Galactic Council had faced threats before, but always through negotiation and superior technology. They had automated defense systems, energy shields that could protect entire planets, and weapons powered by the energy of stars themselves. None of it mattered against an enemy that seemed to exist outside the normal rules of physics and warfare. Speaker Layara, the leader of the council and one of the oldest Zephyrians alive, called for suggestions from the assembled delegates. One by one, each species reported the same results. Their most advanced weapons were useless. Their defensive systems were easily bypassed, and their military strategies, developed over millennia of peaceful coexistence, were completely ineffective against an enemy that fought without honor or restraint. It was then that someone mentioned Earth, the small blue planet on the edge of the galaxy that had only recently been contacted by the Council. The humans who lived there were still a young species, barely capable of traveling between the stars, and their technology was primitive compared to the advanced civilizations of the galaxy. Most council members had dismissed them as another developing species that would eventually evolve beyond their violent tendencies and join the galactic community as equals. But now, as the Devourers swept through space consuming everything in their path, the council began to reconsider their assessment of humanity. Unlike every other species in the galaxy, humans had never truly abandoned warfare. They had spent their entire history fighting each other, developing new and more effective ways to kill and destroy. While other species saw this as a sign of their primitive nature, desperate times called for desperate measures. Dr. Elena Vasquez, Earth's representative to the Council, had been studying galactic politics and technology for the past 5 years since first contact was established. She was a brilliant scientist and diplomat, but she was also something that most Council members had never encountered before, a human who understood both the potential for violence and the necessity of peace. When the Council's desperate gaze turned to her, she could see the fear in their alien eyes. "You're asking us to fight a war for you," Elena said, her voice calm despite the magnitude of what was being discussed. "Against an enemy that is already defeated civilizations thousands of years more advanced than us. You want us to use our primitive understanding of violence against creatures that feed on destruction itself." The silence in the council chamber was deafening as the implications of their request became clear. They were asking a species they had considered barbaric to save them from an enemy their advanced civilizations couldn't defeat. It was a humbling moment for beings who had considered themselves the pinnacle of galactic evolution. Speaker, Lyra's crystalline form flickered with desperate light as she replied, "You are our only hope. We have studied your species extensively since first contact. You are the only ones who still understand violence as a tool of survival rather than a relic of the past. Your people have faced extinction countless times throughout your history, and yet you have always found a way to endure. We need that strength now." Elena looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives of dozens of advanced civilizations, all of them looking to humanity for salvation. The irony was not lost on her that the species they had once pitied for their violent nature were now their last hope for survival. She knew that her answer would change the course of human history forever, but as she thought about the billions of innocent lives hanging in the balance, there was really only one choice she could make.